What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, my company, the J. David Group, will be sponsoring this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. Go to the jdavidgroup.com/hiring to learn more, or go to the jdavidgroup.com/looking if you're looking for your next big challenge. My guest today is Gabe Perez. He's the Vice President of Enterprise Sales for the West region of Coupa Software, which offers a cloud-based platform for spend management. Gabe, welcome to Over Quota.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
So let's just start with what I just finished up with there. Tell me a little bit about Coupa and also the different roles you've played along the way. I know you've been there for 10 years plus, which is an anomaly, certainly, in enterprise software sales. So just give us that background.
Yeah, so Coupa is a business spend management solution. It helps companies manage all aspects of how they spend money, from expenses to sourcing to procurement to invoicing to supplier risk and so forth. It's a problem that every company has. They have to figure out how to manage their money more effectively. Actually, with the pandemic, it's only magnified that problem. So when I came to work for Coupa 10 years ago, the key thing for me when I looked for a job was, am I solving a real problem or am I trying to push software on somebody? And when I took my master's in supply chain management is when I first got a peek into supply chain, and I realized how much opportunity there was for technology to help supply chain. So, I've been here 10 years. I started as an implementation manager, did a demo and accidentally became a pre-sales person. I was one of the first 2 pre-sales people and became a manager there and built that team up to 20 people. Then I helped the team on a big deal team as we were trying to figure out how to get into bigger deals. Then I was the VP of strategy for 2 years, which was a very interesting role. Played many different roles. I was a public speaker for the company. I helped manage the production of our CEO's first book, Value as a Service. I also was a key player in the IPO team as we IPO'd in 2016. Then for a year, I was the general manager of Power Apps as we started to acquire some of these apps and fully unify them in our suite. I helped focus on the sales go-to-market. And then at the end of 2017, Coupa asked me, my wife, and my 3 boys to move to Singapore to run Asia Pacific. So I did that from June 2018 until June of this year. And now I'm back home in the West running the West sales team.
Tell me a little bit more about that Asian Pacific role. What was different? What stands out about that was different from the Americas in terms of maybe operations, customers, communication, all that stuff?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I'm not going to lie. I took on the role. And I was a little bit scared. I hadn't done that type of role before. I hadn't managed a sales team, let alone sort of help build a region from scratch. You bring in the complexity of so many different cultures and countries. It's different here where, states in the US, there are some nuances, but generally we're all Americans. Well, the difference between someone in Singapore versus Malaysia versus Indonesia versus Thailand, very, very different cultures, different languages, different things that are accepted and not accepted. So, my strategy when I went out there is, look, I know Coupa really well and I know this space and I know how to sell and be an expert in business spend management, but I don't really have a ton of experience in Asia and Australia. So the key for me was to just bring on the right people that had more experience than me, people that really knew the region, because, people call me a bull in a china shop. I'm very, very assertive. I'm very, very passionate. And culturally, you have to be careful with that. There were some first sales meetings that I had that I rubbed people the wrong way, and I had to learn how to be more pragmatic, more compassionate, really empathize with the people that I'm selling to, which really helped me, and really hiring the right people is what helped me. Because I said, look, you are the CEO of your business. You have your set of accounts and you know this region. I know Coupa. Let's work together because people out here have the same problem as they do everywhere in the world, is they've got to optimize how they manage their spend. So I would say I probably grew in that role more than any role because I was walking into such I've been in sales for a long time and been through hundreds and hundreds of deals, but it was just different. So it was a really, really great experience, really helped me grow. The region is doing great and flourishing, and I'm hoping to bring some of that experience now back to the West team.
How did you know who the right people were to hire, right? In other words, given that there were so many unknowns and so many variables, and you even just admitted there that you needed to be more pragmatic and be less aggressive and probably in the way that you communicate, how early did you recognize that? And then how soon were you hiring people into roles?
Yeah, so it's, luckily I was able to know that going in because I had done business for Coupa in Asia before. I had flown over there. I have spoken Asia, not a ton, but enough to understand that, at least in Singapore where I was at, I'm trying to think about how to say this in the correct way. Americans tend to be a lot more assertive than a lot of other cultures. And when you're bringing in, I never understood why there were so many expats in Singapore and in parts of Asia. And it's because the combination of the skill sets and the assertiveness that an expat brings and the knowledge and the smarts, because these people are, the people that were on my team were brilliant. When you combine those two things together, it was a really good formula. I think the thing that I was looking for was, no matter where I'm interviewing, there's different nuances in different parts of the world. Because I've hired in Asia, I've hired in Latin America, I've hired in Europe. I always look for that X factor. Does this person have the hunger to hustle? I mean, you have that sign behind you about hustling, right? That is one thing that's just very, very hard to teach, is just that desire to hustle, that desire to win, that desire to be on offense and always be thinking about, how do I win? How can I work with my customer to provide value to them? So really that sort of cultural fit, which at Coupa, we've had, I've lost track on the number of all hands that I've seen since in the 10 years, but no matter what, it always starts with our 3 core values: ensure customer success, focus on results, and strive for excellence. And we, more than any company I've ever been at or any company I've ever worked with, we embody those day in and day out. When we get our HR review, it's really around those 3 things. I don't have to go through some big HR form. It's how are you doing these things day in and day out? And we really live by it. So when I'm interviewing people, I want to know that they want to be part of this culture. They want to be, because Coupa's done very, very well, but there's no such thing as an easy sell. This is a complex sale. So I want to know that people are out there that really want to be part of what we have, because it's not a passive role. You don't just there's no way to come in and say, oh, Coupa IPO, they're doing so great, I want to ride that wave. That never works out. So I was able to find some people that really had that hunger and drive, but then had this immense amount of knowledge and experience that I didn't have. And the combination of those things really led us to be wildly successful in the APAC region. And so I can't take all the credit because it's the people that really, my team is the one that did the work. And I think one other thing I'll just tell you there is at Coupa, our CEO, and we really live by this, and I really believe in it. I'm not anybody's boss or manager. I support my team. If I have someone on my team, I support them because my job is to bring the best out of them. And I want to make sure that the people that I'm interviewing can fit into that culture. Because it's not, oh, you have a VP title and I can't do this or that. It's I'm here to do everything I can to make you the best that you can be, which in turn will help the company and the person.
I like that. That's actually something that stuck out about on your LinkedIn profile as well. It says, I support, X amount of folks or whatever. So that's very interesting to hear you say that. You mentioned that you have a complex sale. Tell me more about that. When you say complex, what does that mean to you? And what should others take it as?
Yeah, I think, the uniqueness of Coupa is, any salesperson has dealt with the procurement organization when they are selling, because by the time you get to contracts, procurement and sourcing, they're running the RFP, they're the ones doing the negotiating. We are one of the only apps that they are also the buyer. So they are the buyer and the negotiator. And I think, what is challenging is procurement has a massive opportunity right now, really a massive opportunity to step up, step forward, and really impact the bottom and top line for a company. And COVID has only magnified that. If you look at all of the cost levers and drivers in an organization, internal spend, right now when sales are uncertain, the only thing you can control is cost and spend. And if you do that right, it's a strategic decision for the long term. It's not just about laying off people or making a budget cut. It's about appropriately managing your spend. So it's interesting when you're dealing with people that have sort of studied to negotiate and get your costs down and get your price down. But, you know, we're trying to sell on value. We call ourselves a value as a service company. So we really, the number, if I can boil it down to the number one unique differentiator about Coupa, if you said all of my competitors were exactly the same, the unique competitor is the outcomes our customers drive, the measurable outcomes that our customers will stand up and say, I saved X dollars, I shaved X weeks off my process, I was able to speed up my time to market, whatever it is. So going back to your question, you have the challenge of you're dealing with a very, very smart, trained people that are trying to negotiate with you. And the challenge with the process is, I think in general, the process of running RFPs has not evolved as we've moved into an as-a-service world. And you probably will get this with any salesperson or sales manager that's selling an as-a-service solution. If you release an RFP in January and you sign in September, Coupa's already had 3 releases. So your RFP is actually out of date. But, you know, so really what I like to do is challenge people to look for a request for value, request for a solution. What's the outcome you're trying to solve? And ask the partners how they're going to solve it and where they've actually talked to people. If you want to shave, you know, 2 weeks off your invoice processing time, ask for references that actually did that. So that's one part of the challenge. Then the other area is you've got our 3 buyers are the Chief Procurement Officer, Chief Information Officer, CIO, and the Chief Financial Officer. I think the other challenge out there is, you know, there's a lot of large ERP relationships. And some of our competitors have invested in this space. So there's sometimes this bias of, I just want to stay with what I know. And we are, you know, Coupa is going to cause the most transformation and change of any solution in our market. And that's why we're successful, is we don't do things. That's the benefit of coming 10, 15 years after. And I give credit to my competitors. Many of them built the space that we have now been able to become a leader in. But, you know, what's happened is that now people are looking at this and they're looking at it sort of, you know, I can't tell you how many times I see people evaluate things. You know, in the 90s, people went to the monolithic ERP. Then in the 2000s, they went to best of breed, and it almost feels like they're going back because they got too wild. And it's crazy to see history repeat itself. So I think the challenge for us is making sure we have alignment with finance, with IT, and with procurement, because the CFO is not going to sign on something if the CIO is not comfortable, because he or she will think it's a risk.
Yeah, so you have multiple decision makers obviously involved in the sales process, which can make it complex. And to your point, these are people that are highly knowledgeable and are paid to not spend money in a way, or to spend less
and I wouldn't say that. I think I don't want to give procurement a bad name, because I've seen a great evolution in terms of buying on value. But I think, you know, when you are a disruptor in the space, no matter what it is, whether it's Uber, who's a customer, right? Whether it's Amazon or Tesla, it's different than what you know. So take procurement out of the process, and anything you are selling and trying to sell a value to a customer that's disruptive is going to cause a massive amount of change and be different than what they know. I mean, the reality is, if you talk to most Americans, they haven't owned a Tesla. So all they know how to evaluate a car is what they know. What's the miles per gallon? What type of gas does it take? You know, how often do I have to, you know, change the oil? All these things that you might not have to do on a Tesla, but they don't know because they haven't driven one. So it's the same challenge, I think, for any pure play SaaS vendor that's disrupting the space. It's how do you, you know, people try to, I think the best way to put it is, in any evaluation, people try to make it apples to apples, but many times it's not, because disruptors are never the same as what you're comparing to.
So speaking of evaluation, when you are, because it's a complex sale and because of some of the elements that you just mentioned, when you're recruiting and hiring people into an enterprise sales role, besides their hunger and their aptitude to pick up things, what else should they possess? What are some of the core competencies that you feel get you excited and will lead to success at Coupa for them?
Yeah, and I think, you know, one thing I always say to a salesperson in an interview, and this is absolutely no knock to the teams I'm about to mention, because our marketing team, our alliances team, you know, our ADR team, our business development team are all rock solid. But I always want to know, how are you going to get to number without any of them? Because everybody knows the hardest part of sales is the prospecting. It's opening the doors. It's getting somebody's attention. And I've seen a lot of interesting things on that. John Barrow spoke to our team the other day and talked about using video and how powerful that is on LinkedIn versus just sending messages at the right time with the right message. But it's really about how can you navigate an organization and portray a message of value that's going to get you the meeting. And then once you get that meetings, how do you make sure that that value is resonated to the top tiers? Because I think, the challenge is you might be talking to the person, right, with the actual pain that day to day is going to be the power user. And they're going to be a very important person for you in the sales cycle, but they haven't navigated they're not used to navigating their organization like this. And they don't own the budget. They don't own the integrations. They don't own all these things. So it's really important to, if you're working bottom up, to empower the people you're working with, because we've had a lot of people actually have many promotions after picking Coupa. But, you got to partner with your, and this is just as much to the people that are interviewing it as to the prospects that might be listening. You got to partner with your sales team no matter what product you're buying, whether it's Coupa, whether it's Salesforce, whatever it is, you've got to partner with your salesperson. And I think the best reps that I've seen understand how to create relationship, understand how to get higher in the organization just with the right message. It's not that you're bombarding the CFO, but you're actually able to pique their attention because you can provide value to them. And the reps that I see, when they have the combination of passion and culture fit and hustle, and they can mix that with the experience of opening doors, and then not only opening doors, but then managing the complexity of a multi-stakeholder sale. And I don't think that's unique to Coupa. Those are probably the key things that I'm looking for. And I always do back channel references as well, because LinkedIn's an extremely powerful tool. You usually can find somebody that knows somebody, because I don't think I've had any reference in my career that's actually been negative of anybody that I've ever interviewed. So I always try to find, does somebody actually know how this person ticks versus has been staged to say a bunch of good things about them.
Right. I get that. Or just paid to verify when they worked and the position they had or something like that. Yep. You mentioned multi-stakeholders. How do you assess one's ability then to quarterback a multi-stakeholder sales process? Like, is it just looking at their resume and saying, okay, well, obviously this person comes from IBM, Oracle, and of course they've done it, so I'm comfortable with that? Or is there another way that you can tease that out during the conversation?
So I actually am not a fan of resumes. I'm hoping one day they go away and LinkedIn becomes the resume. I call a resume like an RFP. It might tell me who you are, Jay, what you've done and your accomplishments, but I don't know anything about you. I don't know who you are as a person. And so the resume to me, yeah, you want to check that they have certain enterprise experience where they might have had a complex sale, but after that first call, I throw it out the window. And I just want to know more about the person. So that's what, and then when I talk to the person, one, you've got to, I talked about the concept of value as a service, its outcomes, starting with the outcome and working backward. I've got to hear places that you've actually done it and understand your strategy. And it's hard to decipher sometimes, because sometimes at bigger companies, people were part of the deal team and they actually weren't the driver in the car, they were the passenger in the car. And you really got to dig in and ask the right questions and understand, where have you faced objection? How have you overcame objection? How have you tailored your message differently for your different stakeholders and been able to align all those stakeholders, even though that because if you think about it, if you use the Coupa example, the value we provide to a CIO is similar to a CPO, but different, because CIOs care about, risk, they care about security, they care about trust, right? A CFO is going to look at visibility, control, and compliance. Do I really have my hands on this business, right? Where procurement might look at value generation, cost reduction, diversity and sustainability with your suppliers. So each one's a different message, even though the same service that we're delivering will deliver those three different messages. So I really try, and I don't have sales reps do a formal presentation to me, but I always want to understand what I call their go-to-market strategy, not their 30, 60, 90, but okay, I give you the keys to the car tomorrow. How do you get to your number? It's a pretty open-ended question, and I've seen an extreme amount of variances. I've seen people that have come with one slide and didn't put much thought into it. I have people that have done full market analysis. I've had people that have went on Coupa.com and created a whole pitch about Coupa and started selling me as one of the stakeholders. So it really tests, not that I like to give homework, but I want to understand how you think, because one thing I said earlier, I truly believe in, My team, the team of reps that I support, they're the quarterback of the deal. I always ask them, what do you think we should do? And if it's different than me, I'm okay with that. If it's different than me and I have other experience that might be able to challenge it, I'll challenge it as well. But the best relationships I have with my reps are the ones that we are able to push back on each other. It's not just, I'm doing this because you're my manager. And that's the whole I support them thing. So I always look to them first for deal strategy, and then I can bring all of the experience I have and see if there's something they're missing or a different way I'd go about it. So I think in an interview process, it's really about making somebody actually show you through examples and through, whether it's presentations or conversations of how they're going to do it.
Talk to me a little bit more about that support angle that you've mentioned before, and that you just mentioned again in terms of how you're supporting your salespeople, and I guess more broadly, right? Like, how can sales leaders or sales managers really positively impact their teams in a way that, if they do have the right attitude, they do have the right aptitude, they are hungry, but they're struggling, right? Like, how can you help them either through one-on-ones or in deal, move the needle in a way that Gabe Perez really made the difference, in their lives, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, I try to never think of it as I made the difference, but how can I enable the difference? Because there's nothing, our CEO just released a second book about community, the revolution of communities, community intelligence. And it's the most important 10 words are, none of us are as smart as all of us. It's pooling the collective knowledge or data or whatever certain situation you're in to drive greater value for everyone. So, to your question, it's been really interesting because, I went to Asia, and APAC had a very different vibe, and I've come back home and it's actually more different than I thought. And I think, when we think of support, we put the org chart upside down. My CEO, Rob, is at the bottom, and it grows up from there. And it's just like a tree. The branches of the tree are supported by the root. And when I look at how to support people, first you have to try to understand them. And I'll tell you, I've ruffled a lot of feathers and I've screwed up a lot of times, where I didn't really understand the person and who they were. And I was too assertive, or I was too much in solution mode, or I wasn't a good enough listener in a situation. And it's something, quite frankly, that I'm still actively working on, because the challenge I have is I have so much knowledge and experience. But I've got to trust, I have a ton of Coupa experience, but if I hire a sales rep with 10 to 15 years of experience, they technically have more experience selling than I do, right? Because they have been a sales rep carrying a bag for 10 years. So for me, it's really understanding that, I don't need to do all the heavy lifting, and I need to allow them to excel. Now, struggling reps is a challenge. And, one thing I learned recently is I had a struggling rep, and I don't think it was because the person didn't have the skill set. It was a situation where the patches they were working dried up for certain reasons. Some were economical, some were political, and this was over in Asia. And the mistake that I made is I didn't get that person at bats. I was following the traditional sales manager. Oh, well, this is your territory, go pound it, versus where can I find a deal for that person to work, to get them experience and to build them up and get them confidence. And that was a rough lesson for me with that person, because I truly believed in them. And, I really think that if I would have done some things differently and supported them differently, they might be in a different place. So it's not a simple answer, but I think, the easiest thing to do is to work side by side with them in deals. I think one thing I see an issue with, especially at larger companies, is, oh, well, my VP won't come into this meeting. It's a qualification meeting. I don't care about my title. I care about how I can help you. And a newer rep is different than a more experienced rep, and they need different levels of help. And that's a huge thing I have to look at in a sales cycle. I was a young, hungry up-and-comer when Coupa hired me. And the reason I left for Coupa from where I was because the opportunity that I could have there. If I excelled, I wouldn't follow this traditional corporate step stool of promotion. I'm a manager, I'm a senior manager, because it was a young enough company. And the management supported me to where I was able to. And I think, so I want to give people the opportunity that don't have the experience, because I needed that opportunity and we all did in our career. But then someone who's a mercenary and has been doing it for 15 years and just really knows how to, you have to tackle both of those candidates. And that's probably been my biggest dilemma sometimes. I like two candidates that are so different, and then I have to look at my pipeline and my team because I know, the younger one without the experience will take a longer ramp.
Let's talk a little bit about when you first got into management and leadership. I know you were certainly earlier in your career there at Coupa. What did you learn there as a young manager that really you had to learn hard lessons on, I guess? And what were some of the things as a manager that came more naturally to you? And where did mentors fit into all of that as well?
Yeah, so I think the natural thing is, I played Division I baseball in college, and if you'd asked me up until I was 21 what I was going to do for a living, it was play pro baseball. I didn't really get my head knocked straight until I was a little bit older and saw some of my friends going to the pros and realized I might not be good enough. So that was actually the first realization that realized I might not be good enough. And I'd say that is the sports is where I've learned to be a leader through coaching, through being a team captain, just sports. I would say sports have had, I'm not going to say a bigger impact than school, but I almost feel that way. It's not, I fully believe in school. I have my master's degree. My father immigrated from Argentina, and school was how he got to the U.S. and how he made a life for me and my brothers and now my family. So I fully believe in school, but some of the intangibles that you can get in sports are pretty powerful. So I think the leadership thing has come a little bit naturally because I've always been in this competitive environment where, I hate to lose more than I like to win. And I want to, no matter what sport it is, you think about, people talk about IPOs, I liken them in the Super Bowl. You have to have the perfect combination of the tech and the people. There's been good tech that hasn't made it. There's been good people that haven't made it. Just like there's Hall of Fame athletes that never won a Super Bowl because they weren't on the right team. It has nothing to do with how good they are. Now, on the flip side, it goes back to when I realized I was injured and I was getting older and I probably shouldn't go chase that dream anymore. The biggest realization for me is I'm not that smart, and that people can be smarter and better than me, and there's a perfect combination of the two, and that I don't always have the answer. And sometimes that's my biggest weakness, where I speak because I think I have the answer, and I might have missed an opportunity for someone to come up with something different. When I first got into management, I'll never forget it. I was talking to my manager who's still on the executive management team at Coupa, and I was interviewing someone that probably could have been old enough to be my dad. And I said, this just feels a little weird. I'm sitting here in my 20s. This person's in their 50s. I ended up hiring the person, and they were very, very good. And he told me, you can't look at it like that. You can't look at it through that lens. They're going to bring a skill set. You're going to bring a skill set. And pairing those two things together can work really well. And if someone doesn't want to work for you because their age, they're not going to be the right person anyway. So that was a big awakening. When I got over that hump, I got to building out the pre-sales team. And actually I stepped out of management, believe it or not. So in 2014, I had a chance to keep building the pre-sales team and run the pre-sales team globally, but it was starting to get too managerial for me. And I said, I feel I can do more before I do this. I feel that you can be a manager anytime in your career. So actually the next few jobs I had were very strategic positions at Coupa, but not with direct reports. And that's where I think I got a lot of that. When I was the VP of marketing, I reported to the CMO. When I was on the big deal team, I was really down and just focused on deal strategy all over the world. When I was running, when I was the general manager of Power Apps, I was figuring out, okay, you acquire a company, how do you integrate this marketing? How do you integrate the message? And luckily I work for a company that actually unifies and integrates all the technology so it becomes one stack. And then, so when I went to Asia, I felt, okay, now I'm ready to lead, and I feel that I'm more well-rounded to lead because, you're either going to be an individual contributor or you're going to be a manager. And I felt like I got enough of the individual roles where I was able to be influenced by all these great people that supported me, that I was able to now give in a more effective way. So, and the people that took over that are running the pre-sales team now are the people that are actually running it. A lot of them were there when they were on my team, and they're brilliant and they're doing a great job, and they were perfect for the role. And I probably wasn't perfect at that time. So it was I think stepping out of management was one of the biggest things for me, was actually realizing I don't want to be a manager anymore right now. I'll come back to that.
Let me ask you this. There's a couple of follow-up questions that I want to ask here. What should I go with? Before I forget this one, do you recommend that maybe others do what you did in terms of going and getting more functional experience within other areas of the business? Because obviously for you, it seems to have made you a better leader and frankly, a more well-rounded executive, if you will.
Yeah, and I think I would recommend it if it's possible. Some people are in sales their whole life and they're wildly successful and that's what they love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was in college, I always said, I'm going to be a CEO or bust. I'm going to be a CEO. And as I was climbing the ranks, which is one of the reasons I went to Coupa, is I wanted the opportunity to climb faster if I performed, which they gave me. I saw people who were okay not moving up. And it was a real big realization for me. How are they happy being just a developer or just a salesperson or just an implementation professional? And then when you start to climb up the ranks, you start to realize why. Because every level you go up, there's a greater level of sacrifice. I mean, during the IPO process, I see what my CEO and CFO and my executive team has to do to support this company. And I'm not saying I would never take one of those roles, but it was very eye-opening for me to see the sacrifice they personally make, not only in their personal time, their family life, the stress that it puts them under. So, you know, I think it was really, you know, I never understood that. Now that being said, and I think that really helped me a lot is understanding that. If you can do it, I think it's great. If you're happy in one role, that's fine as well. Because at the end of the day, you have to love what you do. And I think the best thing, good companies don't just provide software platforms, they provide career platforms. So I think my guidance and what Coupa has been to me is a career platform. The reason I went there is I wanted to perform and express myself through performance and through adding value to the company, to the shareholders of the company, and to the customers. And through that, everybody that I've seen that's taken that approach at Coupa, I've seen people move from ADRs to pre-sales. I've seen people move from sales to customer success. I've seen people move from pre-sales to marketing. Because Coupa is this platform that when you excel, you can express yourself in a way that helps the community and helps everybody. And that's been extremely powerful for me. So I think, you know, and one of the things I actually looked at a college, and I think there's a lot of companies that do this in a different way. Some of the larger companies like GE and some of these big companies actually have rotational development. I probably get the acronym right, but it's rotational development programs where for the first 2 years of your career, you have 4 roles, 6 months each. You know, so even if you look at the more established companies that aren't as loose as a high growth startup in terms of how you move, those most established companies take the brightest out of college and throw them into 4 roles in 2 years. And then after 2 years, sort of figure out what they want to do. So I think if you can, it's a brilliant opportunity, and any company that you should go to should be a place that if you excel, you have that platform.
Interesting. I talked to someone recently that I interviewed for a company who told me that if he can get 3 years out of people, right, his reps, then that's good, right? He's happy with that. And I said, well, why only 3 years? He said, well, because the good ones are going to want to go, right? They're going to want to leave, right? And it sounded to me that company where he's working doesn't necessarily provide that platform that you just described there, and that you have been able to go through at Coupa. But let me ask you 2 questions there. I'll ask. So the question that comes to mind when I hear you talk about, 4 jobs in 2 years within the companies is that a lot of candidates that I talk to, a lot of people that I talk to, have to move companies in order to do exactly what you have been able to do at Coupa, and that what Coupa has done for folks, or companies have done generally for folks, that typically they end up staying for a while because they're moving jobs very often, or taking on new responsibilities every 6 months or something like that. And that's what really smart, growth-minded people need. But I guess the challenge is that externally, if you do that, if I'm looking at a resume, and you might do this as well, and I had a client yesterday who said this person looks great, but this will be his 4th job in 5 years or something like that, right? And we need to put him on back burner because of it. What is your thought there? And then what should people do that, maybe I'm an ADR today, I'm an AE tomorrow, I'm a senior AE the next day, and the only way you can get that is to move up because your company only has 120, or to move out because your company only has 120 employees or so anyways.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the company that I was at before, I love the people. I love the people that supported me, but it was just not giving me that opportunity. And when I left, they offered me more money, more shares, and they actually were frustrated that they couldn't offer me exactly what I wanted. Now, that being said, I don't think hopping on a resume is good. The reality is I think there's two types of people that hop. There's people that hop because they may not have evaluated appropriately and they're looking for something. They may not know exactly what they want. They go and they think they get the bigger title and then it wasn't what they want. So many times, well, I hop because I got there and the culture was bad. Well, that should be a huge part of your interview process and your back channeling and your research. How is the culture of that company? So, I'm not a fan. I haven't seen many people that will jump every year or two and really met somebody that's been successful who's done that. I do see people that are fixers and growers that go fix a problem, create a problem, and then they go do it again for another company. There's people that fit that profile. That's what they do. You're getting them for 3 years. They're going to, if you look at, I think the average CMO tenure is under 3 years. The last time I checked in Silicon Valley, right? They grow it and then they do it again. So now with salespeople, I think you hit the nail on the head. The salespeople that I've seen that have been successful, many of them have turned into managers. Our company does a very good job of making it very hard for good people to leave. And that's not because, we just sit there and write them big checks. It's actually the opposite. We sit there and get to the heart of why are you leaving and how can the platform you're at Coupa fulfill that need you don't feel you're getting. And I think the biggest reason that happens, and my biggest advice to candidates, is you have to really express to your management what your goals and desires are. Just like in anything you do in life, if you're not aligned on the outcomes you're trying to achieve with the people that you're working with, it's not going to end well. And I think that's the problem. If you want to be a manager, your manager needs to know that. If one way of compensation is better for you than another, your manager needs to know that. If you feel like you're in a rut, your manager needs to know that. And I think that's the biggest thing is, if someone really feels they had to leave, that's a problem. It could be a problem with the person. It could be a problem with the company. And I'm not saying all leaving is bad because, we have sent people off to do bigger things at Coupa fully on good terms, many, many, many times, because there isn't always the role. As good as Coupa is a career platform, now, even though so much career growth has happened versus, when there was 50 people, it's different type of opportunities. And one thing we do every year is something we call, a shuffle, where we really look at all the managers, look at everybody and say, are there people that need more? Switch roles, change roles. Maybe they're not happy here. Maybe we need to talk to them. Maybe this is not the right place for them. And that's been a really powerful activity to understand, really evaluate each person on your team and understand what they want. Are they getting what they want? Are they providing? Because nobody wants to be in a place where either side, one of the sides is not happy or not fulfilling. Nobody likes that. The company doesn't like that, and the person doesn't like that. So I don't think, and the other thing I'll say to you, to what you said earlier, if you're jumping every year to be an ADR, I get sometimes some ADRs have to jump to be a salesperson, but you should got to find that first sales role where you can be successful. Because if you're an AE for, anytime I look at a salesperson that has a year and a half between jobs, a lot of these ramps are slow. How could you have made a lot of money and closed a lot of deals? And why are you leaving if you closed a lot of deals and made a lot of money?
Right. Okay. One of the things I've heard you sort of allude there. Are you still there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. One of the things I heard in there is communicate, right? So if you're an individual contributor who wants to, move into management or wants more responsibility, it's your job as an individual to voice that and to communicate that with management before you become I guess detached, if you will, and uninspired, and before you know it, your performance suffers, and before you know it, either you get fired or you better look for a job or you will get fired, right? So communication is really key there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there are those superstars that you see them, they knock the ball out of the park, and it's just clear it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I really think one of the things that I've done my whole career is, and I've gotten no's, right? Especially when it comes to compensation sometimes. I want more of this. I think I deserve more of this. Because I'm not a me guy, but you do have to look out for yourself in some ways. But again, if you perform, it should be much easier to look out for yourself because a good company is going to merit your performance, right? One good reason to leave is if you're a high performer and the company doesn't appreciate it, which is not the case at Coupa. So I definitely want my team to communicate their career goals, I'm perfectly open to communicating. I mean, I think COVID has shown that there's no such thing as work-life balance. And I think it was getting there before that, but this has just exposed that. It's okay for someone to tell me that they're having a challenge. It's a lot to manage. And I want to be an open person, an open door for my team or anybody. I mean, I have people not on my team that will call me and ask me for advice and guidance, sometimes in a personal situation. So I think the more open you are, the further it's going to get you. I mean, if you're hiding things or you're holding things back, that never works out well. And you can't assume, Jay, if you were supporting me, I can't assume you know what I want if I don't tell you. And, it's not that you come in and say, I asked for a raise, I want this, but it's easier to ask for those things when you've had a constant dialogue through your career of open communication. And it's not just the annual, I need this thing.
Let me ask you another question regarding candidates really quickly. If you have someone in front of you that is the person who has, let's say, 3 jobs in the last 5 years, how should they expect to, how should they go about presenting their transitions, I guess, in a way that would articulate to you or inspire enough confidence in them that, okay, they've had 3 jobs in 5 years, but the stories make sense, right? In other words, the reason their reasoning as why they're sitting here in front of you today makes sense. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually bucket people with that type of resume into 2 buckets. A lot of times I see people that have spent a good amount of time at one company, and then they left that company because they thought the grass was greener and it wasn't, and they're trying to find what they were looking for. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes that's a valid excuse. If you're going to leave, and again, this is something I learned really early, you hear the words title don't matter. That's a very hard thing to think about when you're in your 20s and your 30s. It's a very hard term to digest because it somewhat does, although it somewhat doesn't. So, when people are leaving for the wrong things or on this search to find something, then you've got to start to evaluate what were they searching for and why didn't they find it? Were they just focused on the wrong things and that led them down the wrong path? Then there's just people that just hop all the time. And again, I think there are people that hop. So as salespeople, I don't really find much successful if they haven't really anchored themselves at least once. If they're fresh out of college and they've got 4 jobs in 5 years, that's going to be a tough resume for me to consume, right? Even get the first conversation. But like I said, in other roles outside of sales, or even potentially high-level sales management, if the person you're hiring is a transformer and a fixer, there are some CROs that come in, they build up a sales team, and then they leave and go do it again because the company gets too big. You've heard people say, I'm a good Series A guy, right? But once this company gets to Series D, it gets too big for me and I want to go back. So there's people who are good at small companies, and we saw this as we grew. As we grew from 50 to 100 to 200 to 500 to 1,000, some people couldn't turn the corner, which is not a bad thing, right? Some people were okay in certain situations, but then the requirements had changed. So I think the key is to be honest. Don't tell me some story about how all your managers were poor, all the cultures were poor, because that reflects on, well, you picked that company. Tell me the truth. Tell me what you were looking for and why you moved. Why you think. The first thing I ask somebody to tell me their story, tell me who they are, because the resume doesn't do that, and end with why they're talking to me. Why do you want to talk to me? Especially these people with experience. Why do you want to talk to me? You probably can get a lot of jobs. You've been successful at the companies. Why do you want to come talk to me in Coupa? I really want to get down under what they're trying to accomplish, because when you can fulfill what someone's trying to accomplish, that's the magic. When someone feels fulfilled in their job, it doesn't become a job anymore. They just love what they do. They wake up, they go to bed thinking about it. They wake up thinking about it. I always tell people, I'm not a slave driver of a manager, but we're always on because we love it so much. We're so passionate about driving outcomes for our customers. So I think I went off on a tangent a little bit there, but just be open and honest about it. But I think it's hard. If you haven't anchored yourself at least once, it becomes tough.
Absolutely. I love that. I love the way you were able to process that and think about that. Thank you. So let's go into what I call the rapid fire 5, which is just a nice way to end the interview with 5 questions. I ask you 5 questions. You give me 5 questions off the top of the dome, and hopefully the listeners can get a little bit more insight about Gabe Perez. Ready?
Okay. Yep. Sure. Go for it.
All right. What are you most excited about right now, either personally or professionally?
Personally, I'm about to have my fourth child, so I'm very excited. I'm a big family man, very excited about that. Professionally, I'm just excited that I'm working for an organization that drives value. I sell and I don't have to hide after I sell. And the beautiful part of where I'm at is the opportunity. Even though we're very, very successful, we've only scratched the surface.
Fantastic. Congratulations on the forthcoming baby, literally the fourth coming baby. What activity do you miss the most since we began sheltering in place? And I know, by the way, for the record, Gabe's out there in the Pac Northwest where the air hasn't been all that clear as well. So,
yeah, so I mean, obviously interaction it's been tough. I think the bigger challenge for me, I can deal with the Zoom fatigue. It's just hard to watch your family go through the shelter in place, watch these kids struggle through this Zoom school, asking, 7-year-olds to focus on a screen for that long. So actually, I think the hardest thing for me is the family aspect, because I want to give my family everything I can. And it's a very tough situation. Work is hard. It stinks to be on Zoom all the time. Zoom's a good product, but it stinks to be on the video all the time. So I miss getting out there and actually interacting with people. But I think the harder part is actually, just balancing family and work at the same time, because the needs of family have just increased so much because it's very difficult for the family.
Yes, yes, yes. What keeps you motivated?
Oh, well, I'm a man of faith. That definitely helps me. So I'm not on my own. And what really keeps me motivated is just winning. Just winning. I love to win. I love to compete. I love to win. And the fact that I have the opportunity to do that every day with something I believe in just gets me up every morning, excited to go to what I call work, but doesn't feel like it.
You should say what most people call work, but not you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you share a piece of advice or tool that you use to help you stay motivated? Help you stay productive.
So I used to have something written under my baseball brim that said, never be satisfied. I remember, I think it was Michael Jordan had a quote that, when you're sleeping, I'm working. And it's not that I don't sleep, although some people might say I don't sleep a lot. It's that, okay, you've achieved something. Don't be done. What's next? There's always a way to get better. There's always a way to learn more. So I think really it's about striving to always drive outcomes. And those outcomes can be many different things. The outcomes could be watching someone on your team win their first deal, and you didn't have to do, getting that victory for that person. The outcome could be winning a strategic deal. The outcome could be somebody that you had gets promoted. So, really it's about the fact that I just want to make sure that there's fulfillment in everything I'm doing for everyone around me. So never be satisfied always keeps me to, there's more to do. I can help someone else. I can help another customer. I can get better myself. And so that's been sort of something that's lived with me since college, because I always know there's someone better than me and working harder than me.
And what's the best way for people to connect with you? Either to say thank you, perhaps follow up on a question that I had asked, or maybe they want to come work for you.
I'm an open book, so gabe@coupa.com, or you can have my LinkedIn, which is linkedin.com/Gabe Perez. Either way is a great way to connect with me.
And I'm glad to have connected with you this way, Gabe. I really appreciate this. This is fantastic. Thank you for appearing on Over Quota.
I appreciate the time, and I hope it's of value to some people. Thank you, Jay.
Absolutely. Goodbye, everyone. Cue in the music.